Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Apparently yesterday was a second Monday and I forgot to record video. So, hello, I'm Sarah Page. I'm the owner of SAP Virtual Resources. I've been in private corporate accounting now for over 25 years before I started my own firm 2 years ago. Everything from newspaper advertising back when we used to have real newspapers to oil and gas, janitorial supplies, and the last decade was in mechanical construction. So I am happy to jump on and share some information with you. And today we're going to talk about account reconciliations and why you need to do it. So been asked, well, if I have QuickBooks and it ties to my bank feed, everything's in there, so I don't need to reconcile, right? You still need to reconcile because, like every other technology, it's not perfect. Things can get skipped. Um, it is becoming very common for the bank to want to revalidate it. And when it happens, you could miss it a couple of days between. There's sometimes where it gets super happy and just pulls things in more than one time. So you want to make sure you haven't missed any income or expenses. You haven't duplicated any income or expenses or anything else weird. Maybe it comes through not on the pending amount and not the final amount. So you still want to do that. It also tells you what checks you've written that haven't been cleared. So if you're just assuming that everyone you give a check to has cashed that check, and you come back a year or so later and realize there's an employee that hasn't cashed their check, that gets into a whole nother issue. But if there's checks that you've written to vendors, refund checks to customers, paychecks that have not cleared the bank, you need to know that because you either need to reach out and talk with them about maybe the vendor gave you a credit and so they ignored your check, or the mail has lost your check. Uh, One time at a company I worked with, the vendor would hold the checks for 3 to 6 months before they'd deposit. I don't know how you do that, but apparently they had enough money in the bank to pay all their bills that they didn't worry about going to the bank even once a month to deposit what checks they had received. So it's something you need to keep an eye on. And you need to reach out about reissuing them. Maybe somehow you ended up entering an invoice twice. That'll happen. We had that with the mechanical construction. The HVAC tech would leave a handwritten um, invoice copy with the customer, and then it would be followed up with a typed up, easier to read, face it, not all techs have great penmanship, physical bill. And some of the larger companies wouldn't realize they were the same thing, even though they had the same dates. So they would pay it twice. So you need to find out why that check hasn't cleared. And the account reconciliation, that is where you find out what hasn't. So what account should you be reconciling? Your checking, your savings, and your credit cards have to be reconciled every month. If you get off a month and you're catching up, go ahead, but still reconcile by the month. Don't just do, oh, I'm just going to do all 4 months at one time. The more transactions you have to wade through and try to figure out why something isn't matching up, the longer it's going to take you. So trust me, do one at a time. Don't try to do a whole year at one time. And in QuickBooks Online, sometimes it will ask you to upload the statement. If it doesn't, when you are done reconciling, if you look in the top right corner, it should say history by account. If you click on that, it will allow you to attach your statements right in there. And then later, if you want to go back and look at a statement and try to figure out what did clear, when did you purchase an item? Was it February? Was it March? You can go and look at those statements right there. hopefully you have the information also in your expenses that you're tying to in your reconciliation. But if you have any questions, you can just go look right at that statement because maybe you put that expense to the wrong vendor, so you're not finding it under the vendor. And then you need to go look at your statement. Those need to be done monthly. Now, your accounts payable, if you're running actual accounts payable out of there, you should be reconciling that every time you get a statement from your vendor. So they won't all reconcile at the same time. You're going to be reconciling by the vendor. And if your vendor doesn't send you statements, maybe call them once a quarter and say, hey, what is my current balance? So that you can make sure you're not missing any invoices. It's better to find out before they hit you with late fees. Or you know about all the credits. Maybe they gave you a credit and they didn't tell you. Someplace I worked, they had all these different projects, and when they would return material, they would get a credit. Well, if there was a credit on the account, they weren't getting sent the statements. So when I went in and started digging in when I started, I discovered there was like 10 sub-accounts that had all these credits on them that nobody knew about. They were not, for some reason, we didn't have the credit moments entered. It was amazing. We had 1 month we didn't have to pay because we had so much in credits. And these weren't small ones. So that's why you want to reach out. If you're not getting a statement or if something seems just a little off, maybe there's some sub-accounts that you don't know about. You want to reach out and make sure that what your information you have is correct. You should be reconciling your accounts receivables on a monthly to quarterly basis. I would recommend a shorter time period, more like a month, because maybe that customer has sent you a check and they don't realize the bill's not paid yet because the post office lost the check. Or they accidentally short paid it. How many people have done the dyslexia thing where you switch around some numbers? So instead of paying $1,963, they paid $1,693. They don't realize they short paid it because in their head they paid it. So you want to check in with them when you're like, hey, this account is going a little longer. I'm showing this as owed. And then you can make sure all of your payments are attached to the right spot. Some other accounts they recommend reconciling is the owner's equity. That one can be hard to reconcile though because you don't have anything to reconcile to. It's hard to reconcile an account if you don't have a number to match it to. A loan account, you want to be doing that monthly. I know some places don't give interest amounts, so maybe you get an interest statement at the end of the year and you have to do a journal entry to adjust it so that you can match what their records are because they don't give you that balance on the month. So that might be one you have to do annually. But loans, especially before you file taxes and close your books for the year, you have to have that one reconciled because you want to make sure that you're not overstating your assets because you haven't accounted for all of the payments in the correct account. Loan payments get really tricky because the principal goes to your balance sheet and brings down, well, the loan brings down your fixed asset value. So as you're paying it off, it raises that fixed asset on your balance sheet. The interest, though, is expense, so it goes on the profit and loss. So you want to make sure you're not expensing too much interest to the point where your balance sheet, your assets are wrong. And you don't want to not account for your interest in the correct account because then you lose your deduction. And you don't want to do that. So those are the kinds of accounts that you should be reconciling. If you have not reconciled, if you have questions on how to reconcile, what accounts you should be reconciling, how to find the information to reconcile to. Any questions like that, reach out. Let's have a quick chat and make sure you're on the right. Sorry, words just disappeared. Make sure you're on the right track to be in a great place so that when you close up your books at the Everything is nice and neat, and you're not on the struggle bus for months, stressed out, trying to get caught up so you can file taxes. Plus, if you're doing this every month as you go, you can find so much information in those financial statements you're looking at that's accurate and correct. You really know where you are in your business. And that is the best part of this. If you have accurate records that you're looking at every month, you have accurate information that you can work off of on how to grow your business. So have a great rest of your week. I will see you next week on Tuesday, and reach out if you have any questions.